On your Daily Detroit, there's a saying that when you stop growing, you start dying. Well, the bottom line is Michigan now has more deaths than births. Metro Detroit is not faring better. We knew this was coming for a while, but leaders from neither major political party have been able to stop it. What does it mean? How do we get here? What could we all do? My guest, Kurt Metzger, will help us sort it out. He's one of the foremost minds when it comes to data, our region, our state, and putting it to use. I'm Jer Stays. Welcome to the podcast. As I record this, it's Thursday, January 27th, 2022. A quick thank you to those who have bought us a coffee and our Patreon members. Shows like this can't happen without people like you. We'll have a link to buymeacoffee.com/Daily Detroit in the show notes. I know there are some listeners who have wanted to support us on a one-time basis, so we set that up for you. All right, let's do this thing, shall we? Joining me on the line, Kurt Metzger. He is the founder of Data Driven Detroit, as well as former mayor of Pleasant Ridge. He's worn a few different hats, but I think of him as one of our region's, if not our state's, foremost data people when it comes to public places, public policy. It is an honor to have you on Daily Detroit, Kurt.
Thanks so much. It's an honor to be here.
So let's get into the kind of top line news before we get into everything else. And the bottom line is, for the first time in Michigan history, we had more deaths than births. Why does that matter, first off, for the uninitiated?
Well, I think it says a few things. One of the things, Michigan needs more births than deaths. If a state or any, and we can talk about the various areas in the state because it's happening everywhere, but if a state isn't growing, people start to look at it as less attractive for both to move to the state as well as for businesses to come to the state. And Michigan has, for a long time, been one of these, what we call out-migrant states, where every year we send more people to other parts of the country than the country sends to us. So we're always sending more. In fact, back in the recession in the early 80s, we were sending probably close to 90,000 more people were leaving the state than coming in. So we've always had that. Most recently, it's been about 10,000, a little bit less than that. So we've got to figure out how to grow from other demographic components. And so we've been able to grow because we had more births than deaths. That added, and we also had fairly significant immigration numbers. Not dramatic when you look at other states, but certainly we were averaging 18 to 20,000 a year. Well, the Trump administration knocked those down, and we're down to about 4,000 a year. And now we can't even grow from births over deaths. And what it does, it signifies an aging state in more ways than one. I think we look kind of old. If you drive expressways and you look at old factories and you look at just kind of somewhat deteriorating housing and businesses, and it kind of adds to the fact that if we're also dying at greater rates, starts to make you think about a dying state. So it's an important component. I think it's something that the state needs to look at. I mean, one thing that we've argued for a long time is that the state is aging, and we're aging faster than many states across the country. Part of that is because we are whiter than a lot of states, and the white population is aging dramatically. But now we're also, in addition to the fact that birth rates are down, that women are choosing to have fewer children and they're waiting longer to have children. When you already have an older state to begin with, that just exacerbates the problem. What it's just showing is that every component of population growth in the state is going the wrong direction. And I think we need to be aware of that.
One, for people who will have this question, although there was an impact from COVID-19, I'm looking at the graph. This has been a trend that has been going on for many years.
Oh, yeah. I was just looking, the most recent kind of blip in births. I mean, obviously, since the baby boom, the births have been going down relatively, regularly. But we did have this kind of baby boomlet. Michigan didn't do as well as the rest of the country because we had lost so many people during the 80s because of the recession. So many young people who were in their childbearing years picked up and left the state, so that we didn't have that large birth jump. But even in 1990, the most recent high point for Michigan, we were adding 75,000 people to our population just from births over deaths. By 2019, that was down to 8,000. And as of 2020, even without COVID, if you take the COVID numbers out, we still had more deaths than births.
Oh.
So that trend has been kind of getting there. Nobody has really said much about it. Nobody seems to care much about it. And now it's happened. And certainly 2021 is not going to be any better. Obviously, COVID deaths are up even more so. So we expect that, and we expect births to continue to go down. So what is the trajectory after that? And my point is, I don't want the state saying, oh, once COVID's gone, everything will be wonderful again. Well, it wasn't wonderful before COVID came, and it's not going to be wonderful after. So what are we going to do about it?
Well, one of my experiences in doing this for nearly 1,000 episodes has been a lot of leadership wants to avoid hard conversations. And this is a hard conversation, and I'm not picking on one side of the aisle or another in this. Nobody wants to admit that this is the case. And look, I know from expat listeners, I've had the conversations. This isn't new if you've been paying attention. And of course, our focus is on Metro Detroit. And here, there is a pervasive belief that the city of Detroit lost population, but the region has been fine. But if you look back and roll at that data, the region has not been fine. And if you travel, you know that the energy and the investment, this is a regional problem. This is not just a city of Detroit problem. And interestingly enough, you mentioned about immigrants. If you look at the cities that are growing, Dearborn, Hamtramck, what do they have in common? Immigrants. Even Sterling Heights, immigrants.
Yeah, and it was interesting because there was so much fear that the census, because of the way the Trump administration pushed against citizenship, and they talked about a citizenship question, and there was a lot of fear that the immigrant population wouldn't step up. And boy, did they. I mean, you saw 25% growth in Hamtramck's population. You saw a big growth in Dearborn's population, Dearborn Heights. As you said, it's those cities with immigrant populations saw the growth. In addition, the one thing we've talked about for years and years, as you well know, is we're losing young, educated population. They are going to other states. They're going to what we used to call the cool cities. The only one that's really been able to maintain that is the Grand Rapids area. Grand Rapids area has been able to attract a lot of young people. Now, Grand Rapids tends to be fairly homogeneous in many ways. It's fairly white, although it's become more diverse in recent years. But, Grand Rapids, Kenton, Ottawa County both showed more births and deaths. They were two of the only 7 counties out of the 83 that were able to have more births than deaths. So that area is very vital, and people keep coming there. We've been able to attract some to Southeast Michigan, but we're still not attracting young population. We're still sending them away. That trend has not stopped, and I don't necessarily think that GM's investment in EV and batteries are necessarily going to turn that around.
I mean, I couldn't help but listen to various politicians in the last few days and think that the things that they're talking about are not the things that I hear from listeners or the people because the bulk of our listenership is under 50. We're a little different than most news and information places because we have a lot of young people who are invested in things and doing things. They're not talking about these things. It's like two different completely conversations. And I think what we need to do is start making some noise and talk about what actually does need to happen to make these things go forward. I want to talk about solutions. So we've lined out some of the problem. You've been around this region for a while. What are a couple top-level things that we could focus on, in your view, to kind of turn this tide?
The one thing we've talked about for years and years and years is transportation, a regional transportation system. Cities across the country, whether it's Oklahoma City, cities that you don't think of that have tremendous regional transit systems, the ability for people to move around the region. Right now, 75% of Detroiters who have a job have to leave the city to work. And most of them are going to hourly jobs in the suburbs. And they can't get there if they don't have a car.
Or they're paying a lot to get there.
they're, they're paying a lot, or else they're not insuring their cars, or they're struggling a great deal. Young people want those kinds of transit options. They just don't. We don't have it. The Q line is not the answer to the issues in Southeast Michigan. We don't seem to work in a coordinated fashion in any way. This is my argument that's gone on for years and nobody wants to hear it anymore. But we have this idea, I think, in Southeast Michigan and Michigan as a whole, that the pie is only so big. And if somebody gets one piece of the pie, that means less for everybody else. And so there's always this battle. Instead of thinking, if we work together, we can grow that pie and we can all benefit. We got a regional tax for the DIA and we got a regional tax for the zoo. And now we're talking about Oakland and Wayne. We don't even consider Macomb in the process, about the Historical Museum and the Wright Museum. But where is that? And people are saying, well, while we're talking about this, why don't we start talking about a regional tax for transit? That's my one biggest thing. Since you're attracting a younger audience, those who are staying here or who have come here, maybe we're able to attract a lot of good stories about folks in the arts because they can get fairly cheap housing and they can find places to do their work. But that's not the answer to everything either. What do young people see? What are the benefits? What would they like to see? What are the needs that we have to make this a more vital place that people want to either when they graduate, they want to stay here, or when they're from other states, they want to come here? What is it that's going to attract young people? I don't care about the baby boomers. We got enough of those. I'm one of them, and there are plenty of those in Michigan. We're aging out. What is it that's going to bring young people into the state? And I don't think that the legislature is listening to it. They're all into thinking about how do we start to battle against abortion. The way the state goes, I don't want to just jump on the Republicans, but this state is a very conservative and always has been. How do we start to attract young people? That's something that is a struggle, and maybe you've got the answer. I don't.
I don't know if I've got the answer to how to deal with them, except the fact that I think people respond to pressure. And I think it's important that people who do want to stay here and do things start applying it so that people start hearing it. There are examples of legislators I can think of that have their ear more to the ground on this than others. But I think that we need to have more reasons to be here than family. We need to have more reasons to be here than the things that we see checked off. And if I look at it, if you give me some sort of magic wand, if you will, I think it's about encouraging people to be able to put their roots here and grow the first stages of their career here. The second stage is being able to grow different small businesses, entrepreneurship. Because what I hear, and this is what I hear constantly, there is an interview I did with Kari Frazier of Detroit is Different a while ago, and he was referring to the city of Detroit, but also it refers to the migration of people from Detroit to Atlanta. Young people on my block don't see a future here. And one of the reasons he's doing his project is so that young people can start to see a future here. And you've got so many people who they want to do things. They want to be part of what's happening in this region, but the job opportunities, the things outside of automotive, the quality of life. Michigan is an amazing outdoor state. Many of the states that are growing are outdoor states. We have so many assets that we could use, but I don't know why we don't lean into some of that. Like, to me, it's two different worlds. And the thing that I worry about is I've been, watching this for 20 years, and I worry until it's too late, we're not going to put the brakes on the runaway train. And I feel like our population loss and our birth death rates are a runaway train into oblivion for Michigan and Metro Detroit.
I'm glad you think the same thing. I appreciate that. I agree. I mean, these numbers should be telling people. They should be telling a story that is saying, whatever you're doing, ain't getting it done. These are serious issues. We've been sending people away for so long, and haven't been able to figure out how to get them to come here. Again, when moving companies say that people are leaving Michigan for jobs, but they're coming here for family, that's not going to cut it. We've got to get people coming here for jobs, as you say, for opportunity. I see that entrepreneurship numbers are going down in Michigan. the investment has gone down. Just the business leaders for Michigan just came up with their report, that we're now 29th. I mean, they're trying to make us a top 10 state, and we seem to be going, we get excited we go from 31st to 29th.
We're number 29. That's not a rallying cry.
29 with a bullet, right?
Right? All of us is smarter than any one of us. And I think maybe one of the things we need to do, because I don't know if anyone's going to give me any money for it, is really start polling the audience, start asking people, why do you stay? What would help you stay?
Right.
What do you need next? And put together something. We have 67,000 people who follow us on Facebook, 6,000 people on Instagram, thousands of people, more people who than on Instagram listen to this show, putting together something where we can actually say, look, here are the actual priorities that we have to do things, and not just as a cutesy pat on the head. Oh, the young people are doing something. Oh, look, here's your 40 under 40. But why don't we put people, and here's another place I hear a lot of feedback, is that you talk about an older workforce. A lot of leadership does not allow space for younger people to advance, and they put a cap on it. And there's a lot of frustration from a lot of workers where they're like, hey, if I want to move forward in my industry, I need to go to another market because the people in charge, they're not going anywhere, and they're not going to give any real opportunities. And I mean opportunities with power and pay to succeed.
Right. That's such a good point. I was, when I was running Data Driven Detroit, I retired in 2013 for just that reason. And I saw all these boomers sitting in their CEO positions, not moving, not giving opportunities to younger people. And, and I'm sitting there thinking, I've got a 33-year-old that can run this organization, that loves data, that understands things. I've got all the people working for me are young. Let's give it to them. These are the ones that deserve it. And I need to get the hell out of the way.
My mentor was someone you might have known or know, Marge Sorge.
Oh, sure. Marge and I worked a lot together.
Yeah. So when I worked at the Detroit Regional News Hub, one of the things that stuck with me and will stick with me as far as my career, I'm not near retirement yet, but it will stick with me even up then. She said, at some point, it's my job to teach you what you need to go and get out of the way.
That's right. Marge and I were always looking at trying to figure out what were those major issues, what is going to get people to come, and why do people stay? I know that the Regional News Hub we did a lot of work trying to get that information out. And Marge was always a good one talking about, moving on and letting others take the lead. So I learned a lot from Marge, and we always had some very deep conversations, which really didn't advance the work that we were supposed to be doing, but that was okay. I do think you look around, and a lot of the same old people that you've seen for years and years and years still hanging on desperately or being called back or whatever. And you're finally starting to see some shifts in that. But I think, as you said, the young people can't wait forever. Several years ago, when I visited Florida for a couple weeks of R&R and drove back to Michigan, and you saw everything looked new and shiny when you were in Florida, and you went into Georgia, and you went through Tennessee and Kentucky, and you crossed over into my hometown of Cincinnati, and you just started seeing rusted old buildings. Everything looked, outdated. Everything just looked kind of dark and gray. And you just got that feeling of what happened. And so we are seeing not just, now you're seeing a large African-American movement to the South, a lot of it being encouraged by people like Charles Blow and others saying, we could really increase our political might by moving to states where we already have a large number. And so you're seeing the Georgia, you're seeing Tennessee, you're seeing, obviously they're even going to Phoenix, but you're seeing into the Carolinas a large movement of African Americans as well. Don't see the opportunities up here in the North and kind of reversing that.
I want to bring up a success story. You were mentioning about Cincinnati, Ohio. I want to bring up a story in Ohio, and I know some listeners won't like this, but I recently went to Columbus, which has been a bright spot in the Midwest as far as population growth. Now, my preconceived notions when I got there, I basically thought it was a mirror of Ann Arbor. Oh, Ohio State, Ann Arbor. And this is a common misconception. Get on the ground. The place has more people than Detroit. It's growing. There's old houses. Like there was this moment where I stood there and it's like, and it's not overly fancy. The parks still have asphalt walkways and, there's some grass where it shouldn't be. Like it's not overly crazy fancy. I walked around and I was like, why can't we have this here? And they're actually moving the needle. So not that we need to copy them and not that Columbus is the best thing ever, but they're certainly making progress somehow. And there are multiple ways to do this, but there's examples where the Midwest can win. I mean, it gets cold in Columbus too.
Yeah, right. It does get cold in Columbus, but it was interesting. When I was with Data Detroit, and we were part of a group called the National Neighborhood Indicators Project through the Urban Institute, and we had a meeting in Columbus. And certainly, growing up in Cincinnati, it was always interesting because it used to be Cincinnati versus Cleveland, and Columbus back in my day was never really, even though it was the capital of the state, it wasn't really a very large area. And there were jokes about it being kind of cornfields and not, it's very flat and nothing much going on in Columbus. You don't have much, you have a river, but not too much other excitement. But over the years, Columbus has, outgrown certainly Cleveland and Cincinnati. And it's, what I noticed when we had this one conference there was one of the corporate leaders talked about the idea that they had this group of both for-profit and nonprofit leaders who would get together and look at data. And they would look at the data on education, on jobs, across the board, a number of things. They would really study this information and try to see how they compared to other areas and use that information to plan programming and policies. And this was the corporate leadership, much less, not just the data people. This was corporate leadership who recognized the importance of information and utilizing that information to grow. And they have been able to do tremendous things. They got a national high-tech, some kind of award for increasing their transportation system. They work as a region. They work together. We celebrate the fact that Detroit has come back in terms of some restaurants and things like that, and people are more apt to come to Detroit now. But I was hoping that, a strong region requires a strong central city. And I thought that might, help us, that we'd start working together. But, then we had Brooks Patterson. We got Brooks Patterson out, and we got Dave Coulter, and certainly he's worked well with Warren Evans and Duggan. But you still don't feel that. You've got Hackle out doing whatever Hackle's doing. There's just no coordinated effort, no sitting down and thinking, okay, what are the issues? How do we start to address these? That's my frustration. And I think it really has gotten to the point, as you're saying, polling your listeners, your Facebook followers, etc. What do we need to do? The young people need to start speaking up and telling these old farts what is needed to bring this area back, because Michigan is not, I don't care what you say, Michigan is not healthy at this point. And it needs some influx of young, idealistic people. We need opportunities. Yes, as you said, we need those who are here need to see that there are opportunities, that people really care. It can't be just Motor City Match. That can't be the answer to everything.
So one of the things, and not to get too podcasty here, but I'm going to, is that we need to make sure that people understand that we are talking about younger people 100%, but people my age, like, we have houses, we have cars, we have families, right? We're put into this younger bucket by a lot of politicians. I remember being in a meeting where someone said, well, you, a lot of your listeners are millennials. Why does that matter? And I just stared at him blankly. That attitude alone is part of the issue.
If we're putting all our hope in the baby boom generation, which we have more of than most states as far as the share of the population, we're in big trouble. It is the millennials that we need to be listening to.
Well, I'm going to turn it to our listeners here. dailydetroit@gmail.com. We're on Instagram, Daily Detroit, the Twitter, the Daily Detroit. Let's start this dialogue. And if you want to help with this kind of project, get in touch. And so if you've got ideas, if you've got things specifically, there's some folks I hear on the regular, but I want to hear from new people. If you've never emailed us before, if you've somebody who's like, I don't know if anyone's going to hear me, well, send it out there. Maybe I'll read some of the things on the air. Maybe we can do a get together, something like that. Let's kick the door down, Kurt.
I think that's great. Sounds wonderful. Being a retiree, I can sit here and be as involved as I want to be. So I'm excited to think that we might be able to get some excitement going and get some answers out there.
Well, Kurt Metzger, master demographer, founder of Data Driven Detroit, and former mayor of Pleasant Ridge. Basically, all of the hats you have worn and many more. Thank you for your time on Daily Detroit. I appreciate you having such an in-depth conversation with us.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
And we are done for today. Devin O'Reilly will be in tomorrow for his caffeine-fueled Friday show. I'm Jer Stays. Thanks for listening to your Daily Detroit. I'll leave you with this Seth Godin quote today. We are always becoming, and we can always make the choice to start becoming something else if we care. I care. Hope you do too. Talk tomorrow.